Did you enjoy it? Was it a little tricky by the end? Like, what was it like for you with like just all that stuff on all the time?
No, as I say, I really loved it until I didn't know. I loved the whole thing because I just remained very aware of what I would dream I was living through, bringing this character to life and having 6 months. We shot for 3 months and then there was a couple of strikes, as you know, in the industry, which were brutal on people and on the crews, were just terrible. So we were stood down for 6 months and then we came back for 3. To be honest, man, it was so much of the work I really did feel was done for me, and I felt, I've said it before, I felt that Mike designed the most beautiful marionette. Like, he designed the most extraordinary detailed puppet that had a sense of history and place and had a sense of sorrow and a sense of violence. And when I saw the design for the first time, I wasn't privy to, because it wasn't supposed to be that way. There was maybe going to be a bit of a nose prosthetic or something, but I was going to be more a version of me when I was hired. Matt wasn't hiring me and thinking of then burying me. That wasn't part of the plan. But then he had a conversation with this dude and he was like, oh yeah, I got it. And so the first time I saw it was the first time that the actual character in my own imagination came alive before we started doing the film. And yeah, I did work. I did a couple of months before the Batman film with Jessica Drake, who's a dialect coach. And I spent enough hours walking around my living room, my kitchen, trying to figure out the walk. So by the time we did the first makeup test in Los Angeles, it was all there. The makeup went on, the voice came out, the walk was there, and it all just came alive. So it was an extraordinarily powerful experience to be, as I said, to look in a mirror and see something back, look back at you that is 100% unfamiliar to you. Nothing you recognize about yourself. Kind of even the eyes. Even my eyes felt like they were swallowed by the brilliance of what he had created, you know?
And so, for those of you who don't know, Mike Marino here has got an absolutely insane resume and just incredible stuff you've worked on. So I'm just really curious, what first drew you into doing this kind of work?
Well, the first film I ever saw was The Elephant Man. I don't know if you've seen that film, David Lynch, which is actually a very beautiful film, and it had extensive makeup in it. But I did not know it was makeup. And later on in life, I discovered that it was makeup, and then someone sculpted this. Artist named Chris Tucker in England had done an amazing makeup job for that film, and this is 1980. So that really stuck in my mind as the formation of someone's image and how people are perceived. But then Michael Jackson's Thriller, which was just the greatest thing ever, and I was obsessed with that. And they showed an artist named Rick Baker, who was an amazing, one of the best artists that ever lived, doing this makeup effects. He's done everything, Nutty Professor and Harry and the Hendersons and all these really cool projects, who've actually become a really close friend of mine. And in fact, Rick Baker had said about the Penguin, he said, this is like the best makeup ever done. And it's just amazing to hear that from that person. And he really loves the show. So it kind of came full circle.
Still waiting to hear back from Burgess Meredith, but it's going to be a long time, I believe. Burgess, God bless him, is no longer with us, of course.
And then you see in that episode that Sofia was really betrayed by her father, betrayed by a lot of her family, sent to Arkham, for a decade. But you also saw in that episode that her father was really grooming her to take over the family. So I'm just wondering now, from your perspective, was Sofia kind of born with this sort of violence, this gangster side in her, or is that something that started once she was sent to Arkham?
I think that's sort of dealer's choice. I think that there was a reason he saw in her that she was the one to take over the family, but I don't know if it would, obviously, I don't think it would have come out in the same way if what had happened to her hadn't happened to her. But she's so good at it. And she always was going to be good at it, but obviously the circumstances are different. Loaded.
A little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
And then for Colin, kind of the same question. The more I watch the show with your character, it reminds me of that great line at the opening of The Departed where Jack Nicholson says, I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. And there's that great scene with you and Deirdre's character in the first episode where she says, you killed Alberto Falcone because it was instinctual. It was something you wanted to do. So from your perspective, is Oz, again, like kind of born with this in him, or is this something that kind of happened to him as he came up on the hard streets of Gotham?
Ooh, the old nature versus nurture thing.
Yeah, easy.
Kind of, yeah. I think I'm not certain. I think it's a bit 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I think he's always lived under the weight of being, human beings want to distinguish themselves. They want to separate themselves. Everyone wants to be special in some kind of way until you're actually special in a way that's imposed upon you and in a way that society says isn't cool and isn't acceptable and isn't a benefit to society and all that kind of stuff. So he's had this kind of sense of otherness imposed upon him and has been made all his life, I think, feel weak and feel different in all the ways that sometimes feeling different can feel weak. So yeah, that was from a very young age. So all that to say, he was always going to end up losing his mind at some point. And the 8 hours is for him kind of a descent into, it's supposed to be an ascension into power, but it's also a descent into a kind of madness that is born of the pain that he's lived with all his life. He's had a very strong mother figure in his life, played by Didi, and she's believed in him and she's loved him, but even that hasn't been enough for him. So there's been a lot of things that he's been wrestling with and contending with, and I think the potential that's offered up when Carmine Falcone is killed at the end of the Batman film, that kind of vacuum that everyone's talking about, the power vacuum, is something that's so powerful, and it's such a raw opportunity for him to rise that, look, bottom line, after I said all that, the worst thing you could do is laugh at him. You laugh at him, and in that moment where he's being vulnerable as well, and he's talking about his past. I mean, it was one of the beautiful things about what Lauren wrote in that scene was the first time we meet Oz, he talks about his childhood. And this story is for Kristen's character Sofia and for Ren's character Vic and even Ma, and she talks about when she was younger and she used to work the books for the Falcones. It's an origin story for everyone, and it's about what happens to pain when it's not dealt with as it's experienced and it's allowed to fester, and the ugly ways in which that pain will certainly find its way out into the world.
Kind of a father figure, a brother, a cool uncle? I mean, like, how do you think he views
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that. I don't think he's necessarily, put it into words or given it so much thought. And I think at this point, he's only just starting to sort of understand this kind of opportunity in front of him, and how he really just wants to be helpful and not be this sort of weight down on the team as a whole. And so I think that coming into it, it does start to, that kind of relationship does start to grow, right? Like in this episode and in the coming ones, this sort of inspiring figure in a way that Oz is to him. I mean, Oz kind of cares about him, and at least that's how Victor feels. This guy cares about me, and he kind of treats me different to the other guys in the crew. I know more stuff, and it feels this connection that I think makes him sort of see Oz as this mentor figure. Yeah, maybe it's a hybrid of a brother, of a father. It's something familial, something older, something kind of in this mentorship kind of thing. Yeah.
And then speaking of family, Deirdre, as Colin had said.
Yeah, for sure. I was asked before, did I find it easier because we got to start the show from a place of already having played the character, of course, which is a fair enough question. But in the film, I had 5 scenes, and they were all very light, and Oz's purpose in the film was kind of to be a bit of a diversion, a bit of a red herring, to offer a bit of comic relief. And we didn't really get to dig into him, as Laura was saying. We didn't really get to dig into his psychology. We didn't get to dig into his backstory, really what motivates him. So I just knew that having 8 hours of television to do on HBO was going to be an extraordinary opportunity to really get into the weeds with him. And obviously his relationship with various characters in the show, with Vic, with Sofia, and possibly definitely most importantly for Oz, his relationship with his mother was something that when Lauren spoke to me about it, I found incredibly enticing. Just the depth of that relationship and how it's as is revealed more and more over the 8 hours, it's kind of a toxic love that they have, but it was so well detailed and it was so unusual, and it was such a kind of just an awkward angle to arrive at Oz's psychology through his relationship with his mother, who's played by Didi, who later.
And Mike, what'd you say? I mean, just what was the experience like working on the film versus now working on the show? I mean, how was it the same?
I get to be a part of something now. You know, something bigger than just myself. I get to be a part of it. We're in the game now. We're really doing this thing, and it's something. He's playing for something bigger. I mean, money's also an incredibly incentivizing factor whenever you don't have enough of it. So I think he sees that. He sees the life. I think there's also something he likes in Oz. I think he sees sort of this confident, his chest out kind of guy who's a little bit louder, and maybe for himself, he kind of would like to see that part of himself live a little bit more too. And so I think there's just many, many things going on, but ultimately he makes the decision to stay, and that's where we're at.
I think that was an eloquent answer, right?